Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoyed this critical thought, a detailed discussion on game design, and be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future critical thought topics. Alright, we have a quick critical thought for today. This is going to be based loosely on a post I was reading on Gamma Sutra last week regarding complexity and how it factors into the player experience. From the post, the writer was talking about how a friend of his was working on a economic model for a video game, and they spent a lot of time and energy developing complex algorithms to basically procedurally generate the market values for items at any given point in the game. And while that sounds amazing and fascinating for the player, all that boiled down to was whether or not the player will earn a little bit more money or a little bit less money when trading at any given space station. And the post talked about the importance of the player experience above all else. And there's two distinct parts about this I want to discuss with you today. The first is with the experience itself. Now, we've talked about the core gameplay loop and again about how important it is to engage the player. And the player experience is a major part of that. It doesn't matter how investing your game is or how complicated its systems and mechanics are, if the core gameplay loop or the player experience doesn't respond to that, or it's just a completely different feel. It's kind of like the adage, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. In this case, if you build a complex system but the player never experiences it, was it really all that complex or all that interesting? And too often when it comes to building a game, that there's always that allure or that danger of ignoring or downplaying the player's experience over the craft of the game. Now, there is an industry insight waiting for me to talk about on the concept of going big, or when a designer will basically try to bet the farm on a concept or design that they've never really done before. And as we've said, one of the beauties and nightmares of game design is that there is no fixed goalpost for when a game is done. Someone can spend 6 to 12 months on a game, someone else can spend 3 to 5 years. And knowing when your game is done can be a nightmare in of itself. And how that relates to the player experience is that it doesn't matter how much time you spend on your game, how much money you've put into it, if the player doesn't enjoy your game or wants to play it. And at the end of the day, the key takeaway for today's video is this. The player's experience is king. Because, like I said, no matter how much you've worked on your game, if no one wants to play it, then it's all for moot. Now, the other part about the player's experience, and what was talking about in the post, is being able to understand just how much or the priority of elements in design and how they relate to how someone is actually playing the game. It may sound amazing to have procedurally generated foliage and trees in a game, but if we're playing an isometric game and the player is, staring from 100 miles up that way, noticing whether a tree is in the shape of a Y or the shape of an X doesn't do much. And like we said, when it comes to this idea of going big, there is always that risk of putting stuff in your game that doesn't correspond to the player experience or the core gameplay loop. And we've talked about to developers in the past, again, about trying to manage the player's experience with the priority or the hierarchy of stuff that needs to get done with your game. When I spoke with Jan from Battle Brothers, he talked about how the team always kept a list in terms of what features they want to add and how it related to improving the game, and as well as, of course, how much time and money it will cost to work on. And while it may sound amazing to add in features like dynamic weather or completely procedurally generated characters, at the end of the day, it all must go back to the player experience. Because having a complex AI that allows characters to dynamically find the player, but on the other hand, all the player sees is whether or not someone is a little bit more attentive or not, was it really worth all that time and energy? And a major part about building a game is being able to work within constraints and the concept of being greater than the sum of its parts. And again, going back to the idea of prioritizing tasks and design, building something that can take 6 to 12 months and maybe only 15% of your audience is really asking for doesn't really sound all that worth it. Now, it will make your game better, there's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, though, no one has infinite money to sink into a video game. And when it comes to deciding what to work on, the point is that it all must flow back into the player experience, or as we've talked about before, the core gameplay loop. As we've said, the core gameplay is the foundation for everything or any reason someone's going to play your game. And anything that will directly impact it or grow it is a must-have feature for your title. But if something is secondary or supplemental to that core gameplay loop, then it can either be saved for DLC, expansions, or even scrapped altogether. Because at the end of the day, it's always better to make an amazing game that has a few features rather than some crazy mix of mechanics that nothing seems to be fitting right. And as we've talked about, many developers fall into that trap when they go big to add everything they can think of. And as we've said before, there is no fixed goalpost for what is and what isn't a completed video game. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to properly understand why someone's going to play your game and keep to that metric. Now, with that said, this is going to be a quicker or a shorter critical thought, simply because this is a topic that's best to be discussed with a game designer here. So, if you're watching this and would like to join on the fun or for a live cast to talk about game development, please get in touch with me either in the comments below or email josh@game-wisdom.com. To summarize this post again, the player's experience will ultimately drive development of your game. And it doesn't matter how complicated or simple your game systems are, but it's how they are represented or how they are perceived by the player. A complex engine that determines enemy behavior doesn't mean much if all the player sees is, well, this guy is either going to turn around and attack me, or he's just going to keep wandering around. And too often, it's very easy to fall into that trap that more is better. And one of the biggest things that we've seen, especially my mouth is drying out, especially in the independent space, is being able to work with constraints and do more with less. And I am sure for those of you watching this, you probably have your favorite example or two of a developer who managed to do something amazing without needing to spend, years working on a title or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that is, of course, one of the beauties of the independent scene, is being able to see those unique ideas come to fruition and being able to see them without someone, breaking the bank on them. But again, to wrap things up, always keep an eye on what the player's experience is, because that will drive your game. If something is not working with it, or if enough people are complaining about something, you may want to take a second or even a third look at it. And ultimately, when we talk about player experience, we of course have to mention the importance of playtesting. If your game is workable on early access, get it on there and get eyes on it as soon as you can, just so that you know what the overall market, what your fans are thinking. While it's great if people are liking it, you don't want to be halfway through your design and realize that everyone who's played your game hates it. But with that said, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back for daily design discussions here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And I will catch you all tomorrow. Until then, take care. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and when we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.